You'd think it's Monday with the way things are behaving, even though it's Tuesday.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World Collective Energy Share. Um, so, yeah. All right. I think I got my stuff up now. Let's breathe in
I know. Whew.
and breathe out. Um, yeah, it's a little bit of a harried morning, and it's interesting. Yeah, being that it's Tuesday, you think, oh, okay, well, it's just a different day, right? It's been an interesting week. Feels like it's been a month since we had our thing last.
I know, it really does.
I
So
mean,
much as,
I was away over the weekend and I felt like just going away for 3 days felt like a whole week. Like we were saying that in the airport yesterday.
right? Well, and you got to have all kinds of social interaction, which probably was such a different experience that you haven't had in a while that
I'll tell you what,
longer.
it was awesome. It was awesome. And it was great to be around a group of people who were in the same consciousness of
Right.
presence and comfort of nothing to be afraid of. It was
Right.
really
Right.
nice, really nice. But of course, with that, then all this stuff comes up, and you're like, okay, so what's this? And in these conversations, and what am I paying attention to? Because wow, like being surrounded with people for like the whole weekend, it was it was funny. As my husband said, he goes, well, it's almost like it's like going back to the gym after you haven't been to the gym for 6 months, right? And it's like, and you go in like full force and full steam, and you're like, oh yeah, I could do this, and you're like exhausted, right? After
Right. Right.
it's like this
Right.
whole socialization thing and being around people, and it was great though. I mean, it was great. Um, we had what's awesome is to see like just the different kinds of people, and one of the things that occurs to me is this, these are people, so this is a martial arts, these are people I've been going to class with for 3.5 years now or something like that. And we travel together now, and the interesting part was this weekend was the first time hanging out together, that we really were hanging out together and really got to like to know
Right.
each other, right?
Right. Right.
And it's funny because we were talking about that, and we got into a discussion about, of course, at some point the riots, the protests, and everything came up, and it was a very mixed group and everything. So, we got into some really good conversations, and I was it was interesting to see how, like, we were talking about how everybody's got their own point of view, and what was awesome, what I loved, was the people who I have been like there with, that we go to class together and everything else, like to hear some of the same things that we talk about, like just sort of reflected back in the conversation, like,
Right.
and it's like,
Right.
oh well, how coincidental, except that's the vibration we hold, so of course those are the people we're going to attract to us, right? So
Right.
um but it was funny because there were multiple conversations and different combinations of the group where we were talking over a meal or whatever, and it was like, the biggest thing that many people were talking about is, well, the biggest thing is to just not judge anybody, right? To basically, this is my journey and that's yours. And and it's like, for example, here we are, we sit together, and we could be in very opposing views on stuff, but we have a commonality because we love martial arts, right? We love being here together, we have fun together, all that kind of stuff. And so the other stuff doesn't matter so much, because it's like, well, because we find our common points, and so a lot of the conversation we talked about that, which does, it's funny, it didn't even really hit me until today, this morning, that this is like what you and I were talking about as well, the whole like honoring one's journey, and how much we've been talking about that, right?
Right.
And that's been part of, like, we've talked a lot about that over the last several months, and like we've talked about, you know if you want to live in fear, that's your journey, right? If you want to live in comfort and consciousness and confidence, that's your journey too. And if you're a mixture somewhere in between, that's okay. as well. But the challenge that we're facing now collectively has to do with that reciprocity that we were talking about.
Right. And I like to refer to it as codependency.
Yeah.
It's like, I need you to feel the same way I feel and believe the same way I believe, so I can be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can gain strength and confidence because I'm not alone.
Right. Right. And we do that. And that is, I was looking at that going, okay, so what are we going to talk about around that? Because I mean, that's pretty much it, right? Except it's that interaction, the interactions that we have that are so embedded with, okay, so then we get to that place. I honor your journey or whatever, but what happens when you're dealing with somebody who doesn't? And then they spend all their energy trying to, change your mind or whatever. And they're in your life, whoever that is.
Right. 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 Like, I had my father living with me who it just kept getting worse and worse as he got older and less attached to where he was and had less filters on his opinion.
Right.
And it was challenging because I didn't want to be disrespectful, but at the same time I felt disrespected because I was in my own home.
Right.
And I so regret my behavior. Not regret, I'll use it as a tool for learning, that I will never do that again, because that's not honoring my journey.
Right.
That had nothing to do with his journey. It only had to do with mine.
Right. Well, and so then you look at, because sometimes we just choose to not say anything, which is fine, right?
Right.
And it's fine as long as it's not repression, right?
And as long as it's not, like when you abstain, you go with what the majority says. So it's still voting. You just aren't voting your opinion. You're just saying, I trust the majority.
Right.
So it's almost like abstaining from your journey. It's like, I'll go with the way the wind takes me, or I'll go with whoever has the loudest opinion.
Right.
Which isn't necessarily
no, absolutely
in
not.
line.
Absolutely not. So then we get triggered, right? If we sometimes, so that's that's what we got into talking about is, thing is, then when we don't volunteer that, right?
Right.
But the thing is, so, all right, so consciously it's for us to start looking at, well, my opinion is my opinion and it's my journey. And it's sort of like what we were talking about, they're very different. Everybody has a very different perspective on life based on their own individual journey and experiences, right? So nobody's wrong with that. It's all about what they experience. So the ego makes decisions, and that's why it's so important for us to break out of the habit of that, making decisions from the ego, because the ego makes decisions based on what it sees around it.
Right.
Where guidance comes from what's beyond what you see, right?
Right.
And we still, it's such a deeply ingrained habit, because then, it's like, okay, well, so one of the things that we got into talking about were just different things in our school, and it's all good. It's all great stuff. It's just like, okay, so how do we even make it even better? Right. And some of the things that came up had to do with, respecting each other in a way of like not interfering when somebody's, helping somebody else, or like things like that, and that is probably, it's funny because I look at that and I think that has always been something that has triggered me at some level, right? And it has showed itself up to me over the years in many different ways, right? Of when you are instructing something, and when you are the one that's like, say, in a situation to run a situation, or that you're doing something, and to have somebody step in and be like, oh, well, you should do this way, or you should do this way instead, or I'm gonna just show you how I think you should do it, right? Which then over the years has caused me to become more assertive and just be like, yeah, no.
Right.
But, and that has to do with cultural norms too, right? what people do based on like the kind of person you are, the gender, the da 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 da. So yeah, that's the question. So it's like, so then we get triggered, still get triggered. So if we get triggered, then what's still there underneath it, right? At some level of, well, you know, I would give you, so here's the thing, I give you the respect and honor your journey and accept it as it is. So I would expect the same in return. And when it's not done in return, that's when, you know, we get triggered. That's a real
Right. That's a fail point.
Yeah.
In that whole cycle, if you will.
Yeah.
And I guess after we talked yesterday and I was looking at this whole thing, I was thinking about, you know, in Trinity, we talk about, you know, the alignment of thought, word, and deed.
Mm-hmm.
And how, you know, if those are all in line with that honoring perspective, there's a strength in that. And then when you can find a community who also is in line with that, then there's even more strength in that. And I think that that's where we have the breakdown, is that alignment with others' thought, word, and deed.
Well, and also it's the other thing of, yes, oh, I totally, so this is the other habit that we don't even see within ourselves, is when we say, oh yes, I honor your journey, right, as I honor mine. But in this one thing, let me tell you how to do this.
but yeah, it's the but.
Right.
Right. And the but always gets you in trouble.
Yes, because it's always from the ego, right?
Well, or the but always shows you something you aren't expecting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether you take that as trouble or not.
Yeah. Good morning, Gloria. Good morning, Anne. So yeah, it's so we didn't really go, we sort of, that's where we got to yesterday. And we're like, yeah, this is a good start, because this is an important thing right now, because you have a lot of people saying one thing and doing another, saying, I honor your journey, but listen to me.
Right. Right. I honor your journey, but don't do it that way.
Right. But you should do it this way.
Right. Right. Or you need to do it this way.
Right. I mean, and that's something that we also have, something we talk about a lot within Trinity too, is that whole like being very aware of your words and being aware of when should and need to and have to and can't and mustn't and shouldn't come out of your mouth, because that's all ego driven, which is separation, dual based driven, which, because it implies judgment that there's a better way and a worse way, or a good way and a bad way.
Right.
So we impart it, and like, it's such a habit for us to break. So right now, though, we have a lot of the, yeah, I honor your journey, but listen to me because I'm right and you're wrong.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that goes for everything, whether you want to talk about the virus and mask, no mask, da 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 da, you know.
Or you have the power to make things better for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you have the power. You have the power within you already to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's every thought, every word, every deed.
But so then flipping it around, though, is okay. So then what is it showing us? That was what we wanted to talk about, is
right.
When we do get to that place and we're saying that and we really mean it, and yet the people around us are not honoring our journeys and continuously try to impede on our own.
Right.
Because then that becomes a trigger of our own of no.
Right.
Right.
And okay, so let's look at it from that perspective. So clearly, if we look at having as evidence of wanting, then there's still something that we are not being or doing about that.
Right.
Because otherwise they just wouldn't show up, or we wouldn't even notice if they did show up.
Right.
Or if they did question. And is that a question of our confidence in where we are?
Well, you know, it is always 2 steps to worthiness. right?
That's right. That's right.
Most.
Right. So
And we,
there still exists separation.
right. Well, and there's the whole like, okay, well, do this for your people around you, for the people around you. Do this for others, right?
Right.
Yeah, honor your journey, but also you have to do all this for other people too.
Right.
And that's, I think, like, really confusing for a lot of people because they still think, and that's where it's, I think maybe it's that observance, like the importance of the observance of where we are and who we are and the thoughts of that come in, because these things are, so this is something that's so refined, it was really hard for us to start putting a finger on, right?
Right.
But as we come into that, like being observant to that, saying, okay, so why then do I want this? Why do I want somebody else in my life, like telling me what they think I should do? When you say it that way, you're like, wait a second, that doesn't feel good.
Right. Right. Well, and then it gets into, is it a fear of being alone? Because if I totally stand on my own, can I have a common, normal human relationship?
Well, and that also goes back to the other part of the conversation we're having yesterday that I didn't think related, and now I'm thinking, oh, maybe it does. Well, if we don't, so like we have, like, okay, through this, here's an interesting thought. So through this, I've known, good morning, Laurel. I've seen a lot of people who are like, okay, well, I'm fine with this, or I'm fine doing this, or I'm fine not doing this. And, like, and I'm talking about whether it's the protests and what's going on with the, the race stuff or the virus or whatever. And it's like, oh, I'm doing this, but I'm doing this because so-and-so wants me to do this. And it makes them feel better. And that implies that, oh, they care about me. Right.
Right.
And that means I'm valid.
Right.
Which
right.
then is such a very subtle egoic way of saying I'm not worthy unless I have the approval.
Or I don't exist unless some other behavior tells me that I do.
Right. Right. And people like get very like, and it's funny because it's almost like they get very nurtured by the thought of, oh, somebody, they're worried about me. So therefore, I'm important, or I'm loved. And that means that I should love me too, because they love me. Right. That's
right.
the whole externalization thing. And that's a really subtle thing too. It's like, oh, well, I'm doing this because it makes this person happy. Right. Or like, it's like, oh, well, I feel like I'm fine, except I'm just doing this for, say, my child, my spouse, my parent, just because it makes them happy.
Right. Or it makes them comfortable.
And it makes
me exactly what I did with my father.
Yeah. But then also it's like, and it also makes me feel important because they care. They show they care. I believe they show they're caring about me, right? There's so many beliefs in here.
Right.
By worrying about me, and then therefore I should abide by that, even if it doesn't go with what I'm guided to do, right? So there's so many layers to that. So Laurel says, I've always thought there is a biological element to fear of being afraid. We do exist in animal bodies, and they do exist in packs. Well, yeah, we're social animals.
Right. Even though not lately.
I am.
I know, I am too.
So, and the thing, well, and it's that connection, right? But then, like, and then you got to wonder about that, because we always fall back. We do, and that's the thing we fall back on too. Is, oh, but we're social animals. We're da 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 da.
But that's when you start attracting that pack or tribe or whatever word you want to put on it that resonates with where you are. And as long as you continually compromise your resonance, you'll never get to that place where you can be wholly yourself.
Yeah.
And gain that strength of alignment with how you are, with how they are, and then that can grow.
Right. Right. And
which I truly believe is where we're headed.
Yes. Yes. And these are such refined points to be observant of, though, because they're so embedded in our actions and our words, and the way we believe we're better in a pack. We believe we're better when we have a tribe around us, right? We feel like
Right.
we're better. And so, like, the thing is, I have found, and so here's the funny thing, and you and I have talked about this. As we attract our tribe, that and when we say tribe, so let's take out the faces, because the reality is it's just different parts of you that you're
Right.
attracting back to yourself, right?
Right.
And so then you think, oh, I need those people in my life to feel
Right.
whole. When you don't, it's just reminding you of elements of yourself that you've forgotten. And it's not that you don't want them in your life. It's great to have them around. The more we start to connect from that place of, oh, I'm reminding you of that awesome divine part of you that you've forgotten about, right? And we feel so resonant in like being able to connect this way and actually connect here, that then the ego starts saying, oh, but I need that connection.
Right. Right. You start depending on it.
And the difference is, like, I was thinking about this because, it was a very different group of people that I have been hanging out with, that I was with all weekend and everything else, except we had a lot of the same elements, vibrated, like, of understanding, surprisingly, right? But not surprisingly,
Right.
because then it doesn't matter what the faces start to look like, because it's all the same energy,
Right.
because it's you, just reflecting you back to you, right?
Right.
And the more you recognize it's all just you, it could be anybody you come across on the street is going to have that same reflection. It's not going to matter.
Right.
And it doesn't make anybody less important. It just
Right.
allows us to know that we are all each other, whether we're in each other's company or not. That goes back to that wholeness, right?
Right.
Over connectedness, like the way we look at connectedness, right?
Right.
And that's another refinement. Lots of
Right.
refinements that we're talking about right now.
Because I don't really see the answer to our current situation, the solution or the resolution, if you will, until we get to this more and more get to this place of understanding that we are just reflections of ourselves, no matter what the face is.
Right.
And that, and like you and I keep harping on, it's like until you get in touch with that, who you are, and look at all aspects, you're going to look externally for validation.
Yeah. And it's funny because we also judge people who don't depend on pack behavior, which is very interesting, right?
We label them. Absolutely.
We label them, what do we label them as? Sociopaths.
I know.
As like a whole bunch of different things.
I mean, it starts with, oh, they're just antisocial. They're just, yeah, sociopath.
Yeah, that's the word we use.
Yeah, that's the word.
And yet, it's getting to the point, and so and people get a little unnerved when we start talking about this, because it's like, well, but we're social animals, right? And we, like we just said, like, but that's because we still think of ourselves as just, that's when we say we just think of ourselves as meat, as just animals,
Right.
and it's not that, by the way, it's not that animals are anything less, because animals, in fact, I believe, hold a different vibration of consciousness altogether in their physical bodies. So they just don't have to, because they've chosen not to have to communicate the way we have come into the 3D to do that.
Right.
But which drags you, I believe, further down in density. Yeah, higher density. But we say, oh, pack behavior, and but here's the thing: it's all about that external. Oh God, there's so many things that are just coming in now. It's like, oh, there's that door.
Right. Right.
Oh my God, there it was. We were poking around for it. Yeah, it's getting to a place of being, and we've talked about this, right? So we say 100% comfortable being by yourself, and 100% comfortable being in a room of a bajillion people.
Right.
Right. In the presence of a whole bunch of people. because when you truly get to that place, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because even saying we're pack animals or we're social or whatever, that's a 3D judgment.
Well, and I mean, if you look at it in terms of like, if each person holds their own note in the symphony, and then all the faces become just a different note, but yet within the same harmony.
Right. Right. That's the whole,
It's
right?
just perfection.
And then there's nothing outside of us because it's all part of the same, right?
Right. Right.
You know, it's like saying, okay, what if we looked at whatever it is, the 3 trillion cells in our body right now and say, oh, well, they're just social cells.
Right.
They've got to just be together.
Right. And they all have to be the same. How would that work?
Right. And it's like, well, they are together to form, you know, that like we hold them together in our consciousness to form the meat jackets that we have for our physical bodies because of what we wanted to experience, right?
But we don't expect each and every one of them to perform the same functions and to act exactly the same, or this wouldn't work.
No, like, yeah, what if the cell in my elbow told the cell in my little pinky, you're doing it wrong?
Right.
Or, you know, the cell in my liver.
Maybe that's how cancer happens.
Well, yeah. The cell in my liver tells the cell in my heart, no.
It's this way.
You filter, you don't pump. What are you doing?
You're just a pumper. We don't allow pumpers in here.
So it's, and that's where I think a lot of that comes from too, is that belief we have to be, you know, like we have to agree, right? We have to be in a social situation to be loved. And so there's all these have to's.
Right.
And they're very, very subtle and subconscious now because we have so entrained ourselves into it. Right?
Well, and we're just hitting a more of the societal upbringing of where we are, whether you want to call it, what is it, domestication, that Ruiz calls it in Four Agreements. You're domesticated, you know, society trains you in this way, and it just becomes ingrained, and it's automatic. You don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And I think we're skimming that level of, okay, now we need to look at this. Now we need to peel that layer back or shine that light in this corner to see what those shadows are.
Right. Right, because these are very, very little, like, refined shadows, right?
Well, and they're the I don't know. I'm listening to all the insulation in my attic being vacuumed out, and it's like all the places where it's been okay to hide stuff.
Well, and I'm having my house power washed, right, to get all the mildew and stuff all over the cracks and crevices. So
it's like we're finally hitting that place where we're looking at we're exposing and examining all the things that we've agreed we wouldn't until this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that this is
Gloria says we're questioning lots of beliefs, right?
Right, exactly. And I think that that's what this overturning in society, it's like going and turning over rocks.
Yeah, because in a couple of weeks it's going to be something else.
Right. And you there's nowhere to hide right now.
Yeah.
Because that's what we've agreed to. This is what we've agreed, that this is the way we're going to do this. So let's do it.
And you know, it's sort of a beautiful thing to look at. So our first step in this was creating the whole virus situation, right? Perceived situation, which gave us the opportunity to step back, take a breath, and look inside.
Right.
And the other opportunity is, well, when I look inside, what is there for me to do here to change, to continue on, right? And so we've been talking about that, like, well, building up your immune system, building up your, you know, conscious immunity, building up all kinds of that, you know, those kind of
Right.
things.
Looking at your shadow.
Looking at your shadow, which is part of that. And the next, so then what now we created the whole, the protesting, because from the Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff. And now it's funny because the one thing that we were saying was really interesting was how people weren't looking at, like, so some people did look more at their self-awareness of themselves and their lives and how to make them better so that they wouldn't worry about the virus. There were some.
Right.
And yet what were we saying? Oh, but like, you know, our judgment was, is it enough to move forward? Well, oh no, well, of course we had something else waiting in the wings to ensure that.
To be even bigger, more explosive.
Right. So now we created this. And you know, the interesting part is before, like some people I know, including in my family, who were a little oblivious to me talking about that whole, like, just being comfortable with your own immunity and where, you know, how that works vibrationally is okay. Well, now they're more willing to step into looking at how to be more conscious about interacting with others, with how you accept others as who they are, right? And stuff like that.
Right.
Okay, good. That's a great step. So I'm like, okay, well, I can see that progress. I'm just thinking, okay, well, what's after this now?
I know, because I feel that it's escalating.
Yes. Yes. And what we miss is going to be caught in the next step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's
and now it's continuous. There's no break in between. It's just like roll, like look at how one thing rolled right into another.
I like that meme. What? It's riot season already. I haven't taken down my COVID decorations.
Exactly.
It's like, and then it'll be the next one. Just like the holidays in the stores.
Yes.
Are
Yeah.
so rushed.
Like, oh my God, I didn't even get done with this yet, right?
I know. I'm surprised they don't have Halloween out right now.
Yeah. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves, right?
Right. So
yeah, so that's another, so that's what we're doing. And this turning over all these rocks. And in turning over all the rocks, I'm like, the important thing, well, it's all important, but the important, like an important thing for us to keep in mind is to stay conscious and observant of our own turning over of our own rocks.
exactly.
Right. And to be very conscious about our expectations of people reciprocating, because I hear that a lot, like, and I've heard that a lot for a long time, which is, oh, well, I do this and I'm in this place and da, 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 da. And, you know, oh, I did. And it's really funny because then you're like, okay, that's great. And then they go, but, you know, like, as soon as you say, but I did this for this person, da, da, da. But then they just like criticize me for it.
Right.
And to like, which I would say, well, that's their journey and yours is yours. And as long as you did it without the expectation, and that's the whole thing, is we do things with an expectation of approval, of having
gratitude.
Yeah, having gratitude given to us.
Absolutely.
Of having recognition, right, of what we do.
Right.
Because that's a very hidden ego thing of, oh, well, that makes me feel better about myself. It values me, you know, and somebody is constantly saying, oh, well, I did this for some, and it's just like, it's just the same thing as when you're saying, oh, well, I did this for these people and I did this for this and I spent all this time for this and I did all this. It's this plea for acknowledge me and how good I am. And then if nobody acknowledges it, then the person gets either A, gets upset about it, right? Or B, tries even harder.
Right. I keep hearing that the difference between doing and being is the having of expectations.
Yes.
So
I love that. Yeah.
So if you're being, you're simply holding a vibration with no expectation of that vibration.
Yeah.
Versus doing is, there's always not always, there seems to be a set of expectations attached to the vibration you're holding.
Yes. Right. And that goes along with the having your own journey and honoring other people's journey, and then being upset when somebody doesn't honor yours, right?
Right.
That's because that's an
Reciprocity.
expectation, right? Because
Right. Right. Yeah. Gloria says seeking warm fuzzies. Right.
oh, that didn't show up. It didn't scroll. I hate when that happens. Okay. Oh, my phone fell again. Excuse me. Can't get it to stand up this morning. So yes.
So
Yes.
expectations are something that are a clear indication of where you're coming from, what your basis is.
Yep. Yep. And it was funny. A lot of that conversation just kept on coming up this weekend too. Like I think about that. It was like, yeah, about like everybody, because then you start hyper analyzing your scores from the test, because we were being tested and on a panel of judges, and like seriously, and I had to catch myself, getting super anal about the difference of like a quarter of a point
And getting caught up in it.
and irritated.
Right.
And at the end of the day, what finally came to me was, did you pass? You did. What does it matter? As like somebody I know always would say, what did the guy who got the lowest score in passing his medical boards, what do they call him? Doctor.
A doctor. Absolutely. Yep.
And so, or the person. And so
it's like somebody, one of my kids one time said, C's get degrees.
Right. And so, in all honesty, there is a 3-point range of passing the black belt exams. 3 points. If I'm in that range, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So why am I sitting here getting irritated about a quarter of a point? Seriously, we were. And then I was like, wow, like this is it's a little bit, overkill. And then it's like, well, at the end of the day, it's really a pass or fail, right? You did it or you didn't do it.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because now I get to move to the next level, right?
Right.
So let's look at that from a collective. Maybe that's what we're doing. Ooh, that's interesting to look at too.
Right.
Because remember, we had all these discussions about, well,
don't have to complete all the details.
Right. And we were having these discussions about, are we ready to get to the next level? Are we ready to go forward? Are we ready to come? Remember? And it was like, oh, I don't feel like we're ready. We don't feel like enough people have done that. Well, there's expectations, right?
Right.
And so it's like, okay, at the end of the day, I didn't even connect that to now. It's like, at the end of the day, it's a quarter point. Who the hell cares? Just move on. You passed the level.
Exactly. Right. You don't see anybody in a video game who makes it to the next level that goes, oh, but wait, I didn't get to do this in this other level.
I didn't get that one coin. I got to go back and do
one ghost over here.
Right.
They're just relieved to be moving on.
Yes. Gloria says, when you're constantly doing, then you don't have time to be quiet within yourself. Well, yeah, that's been what we've been talking about for a long time. But these are these things that we're just so like, not even like, we're so blind to within ourselves. Like, so that's a great thing to see. So it's for us to let go of all the details, right?
Right.
Because it's like, okay, a quarter point. Seriously. And I literally, I'm like saying that to myself over the weekend. I was like, okay, finally I did. I just sort of like hit myself, and then I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So and so it's like, okay, it doesn't matter if you come across the finish line, right? Like torn up, ragged, filthy, whatever, or pristine and perfectly preserved and stuff. It doesn't matter. It only matters to how you choose to do it,
how you've honored your journey.
Yes,
whatever that looks like,
without the expectations, and to say, hey, that's when we get into I could have done this, or should I have done that?
Right. Hindsight. Yep.
Right. The hindsight thing. And it's like, well, but I didn't, or I did in another timeline that wasn't this one. So I'm just going to honor that this was all perfect here and now.
Right.
And when we do that, actually, then it'll start to, I guess it'll just start to form around us.
Yeah. Things I think will start syncing up.
Oh, that feels really good, actually.
Yeah.
It's like when we say, oh, I didn't get the dishes done. Oh, I couldn't leave before this. Right. And maybe that was it this morning, is you and I both had like these weird things all popping up. We got this going on. We got that going on. We got this going on. We're going to get online. We're going to get online.
Right. My computer was like, no, 5 more minutes. Yeah. 5 more minutes.
Yeah, I know. It was a quarter after when you texted me. You're like, crap, my computer said update's going to take 40 minutes.
Right. Right. And then I made the mistake of saying, well, now it's just 30 minutes. So it really is full of shit. So then I said, okay, I think I'll slow down.
Right. And then what? Then we judge ourselves, or, oh, we were supposed to be on at 9:30 and we, then you're like getting irritated with yourself, right? Because you're like, oh, well, da, da, da. And that's why I was like, it is what it is. It's why it's like, we get people. What I find really interesting is when there are people in the spiritual realm and do spiritual consciousness work and whatever, that still get really irritated at people for being late to something.
Right. Right.
What they consider late. And I did I used to years ago, but now I'm just like, we're all on our own journeys, right? So if I set it up so that everything flows perfectly, then like how many times I'll have clients come like 10 minutes late, and it was an hour before they came that I was like, God, I wish I had 10 more minutes just to get this done before they got here.
Right.
Perfect, right?
Right.
I create that.
How many times have you and I set up a time for a call, and I'll have my phone in my hand saying I need 5 or 10 more minutes,
and a text will come over me.
The text and say I need at least 15. Like, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, right. So it's like, okay, and when we start to trust that, it's all right. And so like it's great, because then the more people know me and that I work with, like my clients or students or anybody, it's like the more you get to know me, it's just like, okay, that's where I've become to a place, and that's where I'm very conscious of, even if I start to look at myself like getting irritated about something. So I have people that I know who are constantly 15 minutes after when they are like, were saying they were going to get there, but then you know what? It's fine, because for whatever reason, it always works out.
Right.
I went through a period of being that way because I just was having a hard time like holding expectations within the linear timeline,
right,
versus not being there, like versus the consciousness being outside of it. And so then it was just at some point I just let go of then the expectation, because I found the more I tried to expect that of myself, the harder it was for me to stay in it.
Right.
Versus letting go to say
right.
It's perfect in that interaction, right? So that's the same thing when we're saying, okay, I'm honoring my journey. And in doing that, I can't do anything but honor yours, which means that even if you want to, like if you like have a strong opinion about my journey, then I don't have to feel like you're trying to impart it on me. You can go and say whatever you want to say.
Exactly. Yep.
And Gloria says, or you learn from your choices. Well, yeah. And so my understanding is we choose everything. We just sort of play it out in different timelines and then let it all come back together so that we have all that experience, because we can.
Right.
So it is what it is. And so that's the level of acceptance for us. So every time it's just a very important, there's my phone again. God, it just won't stand up today. Obviously I'm vibrating very physically.
Right.
But I'll just put it on over here. Maybe it won't fall now. So what is there for us to look at for our session thing today? It's that and it's not worrying about all those small details, right? It's like being complete, what is that? Being back to being completely present
and free, and trusting that that's enough.
yeah. And maybe part of it too is what's coming to me is changing the definition of what enough is, because we have a tendency to believe that enough is also a little bit in lack. When we say it's enough, it's like, oh, that's
Just enough.
just enough.
Right. Well, we have access to everything.
Right.
I feel like I'm already halfway out there. So
I
words.
know. Well, I just, yeah, I feel this all across my chest, and it's like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there are things that are already sort of flashing through my mind of, yeah, see how that aligns with this and this and this and this little judgment. And see, these are the little tiny the little ant-sized judgments that we
Right.
don't even realize we have consciously, right? That
Right.
we're so embarrassed, like, oh, well, wow, should have done that. Or, you know, or why didn't they do that? Or, you know. Yeah. All right. Well, so whatever that is, because that just feels really good.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's go and do that. Whatever that turns out to be. There really isn't a lot of words. It has to do with that acceptance. It's just acceptance at another level,
Mm-hmm.
and presence and being, and freeing ourselves of expectations. Right.
Right.
What did you call? What did we say? Because I said we were looking for. Oh, it was unconditional namaste.
Right. Right.
Right. Meaning that the word namaste is the divine in me bows to the divine in you and honors the divine in you.
Honors the divine in you. Right.
And that's unconditional
Right.
because you're me.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
Right. Yeah. No,
But
except that's another one. Except.
accept. Right.
and allowing ourselves to be that as well as others. Even if they don't do that to us, it doesn't matter because that's still expectations.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that feels really good. All right. All that. Let's go do that. Ooh, that was really nice.
Yeah.
I saw this it was like I went to a dumpster and I started throwing out, and it was like these little things that were like, in the junk drawer, right?
Right.
And I was just like dumping them there. And then I turned around and there's this line of like endless number of people that were all me coming to do the same thing. And like the more that happened, I was like, oh, that feels so good. Oh, and it would just all like poof and disappear, And I was like, and I got so far out there. That just felt so nice.
When we first went out there, I kept hearing the phrase, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results. And it was like, there's the expecting.
Yeah.
And for some reason that was relevant to what I needed to hear. So it was, it's really that expectation is so prevalent in everything we do.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, obviously we needed, I felt like something got untied that that we forgot was so knotted up that it
Right.
was just there.
Yeah.
So now it's just sort of like this. All right. Well, so for this week, just be conscious of those rocks turning over.
Right. Look at those expectations.
Yes. Every step of the way. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah C. Gavagnoni.
signing off on this week's Ascended World. Have a good one.